She didn't flinch when the auctioneer called her damaged goods. She didn't blink when the first bid came from the man who ran the farrier's shed, the same one who used to make her sweep up after the horses, even in the cold. Her name wasn't on the block. Just a number, scratched in chalk on the side of her sleeve like cattle. $14 was all she went for. And still, no one said a word. No one except the man who stepped forward from the back, boots dusty, hat low, voice like gravel under rain. 15, he said, quiet but firm. The crowd chuckled. The auctioneer leaned in. You sure? She don't talk, ain't much use. The man didn't answer. He just reached into his coat and placed 3 crumpled bills and a silver button on the edge of the platform. The hammer fell. Sold. She didn't look up, just stood there, thin shoulders tight, fingers twitching near the frayed hem of her skirt. The man didn't touch her, didn't grab her arm like the others had done before. He just stepped aside, nodded once toward the alley behind the post, and waited. She followed. Not because she trusted him, but because she'd learned the hard way that standing still too long meant someone worse would come along next. Behind the alley, he handed her a wool shawl. She stared at it. It's clean, he said. No tricks. Still, she didn't take it. He knelt, laid it on a crate, and looked at her. Not with pity, not with desire, but with something she didn't recognize. Stillness. You got a name? He asked. She shook her head. Not because she didn't have one, but because it had been beaten out of her until she wasn't sure it belonged to her anymore. Then you can borrow mine, he said. Call yourself Walker, if it helps. She blinked. I didn't buy you to keep you, he added. I bought you to stop them from getting you first. And just like that, the cold inside her shifted. Not warmth, nothing that sudden. But something cracked open, a sliver, a breath. She sat down beside the shawl but didn't touch it. Not yet. And Walker? He just sat with her, said nothing more. As if he knew that silence could be a kind of kindness too. The town called her broken. But that night, no one called her anything. And for the first time in years, she realized that might be the first step toward becoming someone again. The cabin stood at the edge of nowhere, tucked between 2 hills that seemed to lean together like they were shielding something too fragile for the wind. He didn't speak on the ride there, and she didn't ask where they were going. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It just existed, like snow that hadn't decided whether to fall. When they arrived, he climbed down first and unlatched the gate with a single tug, then walked to the porch and opened the door wide without looking back. She sat on the horse another full minute, unsure if this was the part where things turned ugly. But the cold nudged her down, and hunger pulled her forward. Inside, the room smelled like cedar, old tobacco, and something warm. Beans simmering, maybe, or bread that had burned a little. It was clean, but lived in. A pair of boots stood by the hearth. A small bookshelf leaned with pride even though 2 shelves were bowed. He pointed to the chair nearest the fire. You sit, I'll bring food. She obeyed without words, curling her feet beneath her like she expected the floor to vanish. He ladled stew into a tin bowl and handed it over without ceremony. No prayer, no rules, just food. She stared at the chunks of potato and meat floating in the dark broth and didn't move. You think I poisoned it? He asked gently. I've eaten worse, she mumbled. Her voice surprised them both. He didn't smile, but something softened in his jaw. Good. Then eat. She did. Slowly at first, then faster, spoon clinking until the bowl was empty. He didn't ask how long it had been. He didn't ask who she belonged to before. He just stood and added more logs to the fire. You can sleep here, he said, pointing to a small cot near the window. No one comes this far out, and I don't ask questions you don't want to answer. She looked at him then. Really looked. At the gray in his beard, the scar under his eye, the way he didn't shrink or puff up under her gaze. Why me? She whispered. He stared into the flames. Because the others looked at you like a chore. I looked at you and saw someone I couldn't walk away from. She didn't know how to hold those words, so she wrapped herself in the shawl from before and lay down on the cot, back to the wall. She didn't thank him. Not yet. But for the first time in years, she slept without clutching her own fists. She woke to the sound of birds. Real birds. Not the rusted creak of iron gates or drunken laughter behind doors. Light spilled through the cracks in the wooden slats, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then she saw the fire still smoldering in the hearth, the cot beneath her solid, and the bowl from last night washed clean on the table. She sat up slowly, unsure whether to stay put or run, but the ache in her legs told her there was nowhere to run to anymore. Walker wasn't inside. The door was open, wind tugging gently at the edge of the curtain. She stepped out and saw him in the field, splitting wood like he wasn't thinking about it, just doing it the way you breathe. She hovered in the doorway, fingers on the frame. He didn't turn around. There's coffee if you want it, he said. Won't bite if it's cold. She stepped outside, drawn more by the stillness than the invitation. You always let strangers sleep in your home? She asked. Her voice was clearer now, low but steady. Only the ones nobody else will. What if I robbed you? He shrugged. Ain't got much to steal, and if you took it, I'd figure you needed it more. She looked down at her bare feet, then back at the cabin. You didn't ask me my name. Didn't seem like you wanted it spoken. She nodded once. I don't remember if I do. He stopped swinging and turned to face her. Then you can make a new one. Names are just words until someone makes them mean something. What's yours mean? Used to mean trouble, he said. Now, I'm not sure. She didn't reply, but something inside her moved. Not a memory. She had too few of those left, but a flicker of something she couldn't name. What do I do here? She asked finally. What's expected? Nothing, he said. Eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired. If you want to help, there's a garden that needs weeding and a horse that likes company, but you're not a worker here. You're a person. That word, person, landed heavier than any chain she'd worn. She didn't know what to say, so she walked back inside, poured herself the coffee, and sat at the table like it was hers. And maybe, for the first time, it was. She still didn't have a name, but she had a place to drink coffee. And in the West, that was sometimes the first thing they took from you. Here, it was the first thing she got back. It was carved faintly into the wood above the hearth, barely more than a scratch, nearly erased by smoke and years of heat. But she noticed it while stoking the fire that morning, fingers brushing the groove like a ghost had whispered to her hand. Is that your name? She asked later, when Walker came in with his coat dusted from hay. He looked up, squinting. Used to be. My mother put it there when I turned 13. Said I'd need to remember who I was in case the world tried to tell me different. It's faded. So did I, for a while. She studied the worn letters. W. Walker. Nothing fancy, no frills, just a quiet declaration that someone had existed. What if I put one beside it? She asked, unsure why she said it. Maybe it was the way the light touched the wood, or maybe she was tired of not having a shape to fit into. He didn't answer with words. He reached into the drawer beside the table and handed her a small carving knife, its handle smoothed from years of use. Pick your spot, he said. Her hand trembled as she took it. She stood before the hearth, staring at the plank beside his name. "I don't have a real name," she said. "Not one anyone gave with kindness." "Then give yourself one now." The cabin fell so still she could hear the wind press against the walls. And then, slowly, she began to carve. Not fast, not well, but with purpose. The knife slipped once, drawing a scratch across the wood that didn't belong. She winced. "Mistakes are part of the story," Walker said behind her. She nodded. When she finished, she stepped back. Lena, it read. Not the name her mother had once screamed, or the one the saloon men had slurred. Just 5 letters. Simple, unbroken, hers. "It was the name I used to whisper to myself when I was scared," she said. "Didn't think I'd ever speak it out loud again." "Then it's the right one." He poured water into the basin, said nothing more. She sat near the hearth and stared at the letters glowing faint in the firelight. W. Walker. Lena. 2 names in wood. 2 people who didn't ask for each other, didn't promise anything, but had shared silence, space, and safety. It wasn't a family. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something people who called her broken never thought she'd be part of. Something with roots and room to grow. They came just after sunrise, when the frost still clung to the grass and the smoke from the chimney hadn't finished rising. 2 of them, on horseback, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats and arrogance. Lena saw them from the window and froze, the ladle in her hand hovering above the pot of oats. She didn't have to see their faces to know. The weight in her chest told her before her eyes did. Walker stepped out before they could knock, coat unbuttoned, shotgun resting calmly across his arm like he wasn't worried, like he'd been expecting them. "You got something of ours," the taller one said. "Girl from the auction, not rightly purchased." "I paid what they asked," Walker replied. "You paid to stop the bidding," the shorter man snarled. "That ain't the same as owning." Walker's eyes didn't blink. "She's not owned. She's not yours, and she's not for sale." Lena stepped back from the window, stomach turning. She knew these men, not by name, but by smell, by threat, by the way their voices made her want to disappear into walls. One had dragged her by the arm once for spilling a drink. The other had tried to make her laugh when her lip was split. "We've got a note from the sheriff," the taller man said, waving a dirty scrap of paper. "Says she was to be taken in by county hands." "Then take it to the sheriff," Walker said. "Not here." "We will," the man growled. "But if she don't come with us now, we'll come back with more than words." Walker took 1 step forward. "And when you do, bring coffins. 1 for each of you." The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was final. The men backed off, muttering, spitting in the dirt, turning their horses around without another word. When Walker came back inside, Lena stood stiff by the hearth. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "No," he agreed, "but neither will I." "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me." He looked at her then, not like a man looking at trouble, but like a man who remembered being it. "Because you're not theirs. Because they think calling someone broken makes them easy to control, and because someone once looked at me the same way." Lena didn't cry. She'd used up tears years ago. But something burned behind her ribs. Not fear, something fiercer. Something alive. She returned to the pot and stirred the oats again. "We should eat," she said. "Looks like we'll need our strength." And Walker just nodded, as if she'd said more than he ever could. The town of Mill Ridge had always known how to look away, from bruises on a girl's arms, from a drunk man dragging a child by her collar, from auction blocks with chalk names instead of faces. But they couldn't look away when Lena walked in beside Walker that day. Her chin lifted, her dress plain but clean, her eyes meeting stares like they no longer frightened her. They had come for supplies, nothing more. Flour, salt, a new kettle. But the moment she stepped onto the wooden walkway outside the general store, the whispers began. "Ain't that the saloon girl? Thought she got taken out west. Walker's taken her in, huh? That man always was strange." Lena heard every word, but none of it pierced her. What did sting, sharp and deep, was the silence of the shopkeeper, a heavy-set man who refused to look her in the eyes when she placed the sack of oats on the counter. "You paying for this, Walker?" he asked. "She's got hands," Walker replied. "She paid for it already, in blood." The man grunted, but took the money. No thank you. No words for her. And Lena might have left it at that, might have swallowed the shame, like always, if not for the woman who stepped up behind her. Gray hair, rough fingers, and eyes that had clearly seen more than gossip. "Girl's got more backbone than any of you," the woman said, loud enough for every ear in the shop. "I saw her save a calf from freezing last week, bare hands and all. Where were you lot? Still wagging tongues, probably." A few people turned away. Some lowered their heads. But one young man, the blacksmith's apprentice, stepped forward with a bag of nails and dropped it in Lena's basket. "On the house," he said, not smiling, but not sneering either. And just like that, the balance shifted. It didn't swing. It didn't crash. It tilted. By the time they left the store, 3 people had nodded at her. One little girl had waved, and Walker, walking beside her, didn't say a word. But she could feel it in his posture, in the ease of his stride. They were no longer invisible. They were being watched. Not with disgust, but with curiosity. With maybe, just maybe, something close to respect. "That was different," Lena said on the way back. "Towns are like fires," Walker replied. "Sometimes you don't need to burn them down. Sometimes you just have to stand in them long enough until the heat turns in your favor." Lena didn't answer. But she walked taller, and the bag of flour in her arms felt lighter than ever before. He came on a Thursday, when the rain was light and the world felt quiet, as if the land had paused to breathe. Lena was hanging laundry behind the cabin, bare feet in the soft grass, the smell of soap and pine settling around her like peace. She didn't hear the horse at first, not until its hooves sunk into the wet earth and the shadow of the rider stretched across her drying linens. She turned, heart already beating wrong. It was him. Caleb Monroe, the saloon-keeper's cousin. The man who once locked her in the cellar for talking back, who told her she was lucky anyone wanted her. "Didn't think you'd end up this far out," he said, voice syrupy with threat. "Didn't figure you'd last this long, neither." She didn't speak. She didn't run. She reached slowly for the clothespin she'd dropped, and in that moment he laughed. "I'm here to collect. You were bought on borrowed coin, girl, and I'm the one they sent to settle the debt." "I don't owe you," she said quietly. "Number but your body does." That's when Walker stepped from the trees. No gun in hand, just an axe slung over his shoulder like he'd wandered out to split wood and found a problem instead. "You've got 3 seconds to leave," Walker said. Caleb spat. "You think you can protect her forever? She's already ruined." "No," Walker said. "She was ruined the day men like you decided bruises meant ownership. Now she's building." Caleb dismounted. "Try me, old man." But he didn't make it more than 2 steps before the axe swung, not into flesh, but into the dirt at his feet, deep and fast, stopping him cold. "That was 1, Walker said. 2 is next. You want to find out what 3 looks like?" Caleb backed off, fury and fear swirling behind his eyes. "She'll never be anything," he snarled. "You can't turn mud into silver." Lena stepped forward, lifting her chin. Maybe not. but you can bury a weed in it and grow something that chokes out the rot. Caleb left. Not fast, not humiliated, but knowing something had changed, and not in his favor. Afterward, Lena sat on the porch, shaking only a little. Walker sat beside her. "You didn't run," he said. "Not this time." "I was tired of being taken," she whispered. "He can't have me. Not anymore." "He never did." She nodded, the truth of it settling like warmth in her bones. And when she stood to bring in the laundry, she didn't look over her shoulder once. They'd invited her to the harvest gathering the same way they always invited the women from the outskirts. Late, as an afterthought, as if kindness had to pass through judgment first. Walker brought the invitation inside, folded in his coat pocket, said nothing as he handed it over. Lena read it 3 times before setting it gently on the table, like it might vanish if touched too hard. She hadn't been part of anything before. Not by name, not by choice. She spent the whole morning deciding not to go. Then she ironed her cleanest dress. The sun was sinking low when they arrived at the Granger farm, where tables stretched under cottonwood trees and the air smelled like apples, roasted meat, and wood smoke. Laughter rang out like it belonged to another world, one she'd always watched through a crack in the door. Eyes turned when she stepped into the light. Not cruel, not warm, just curious, like they didn't know where to place her yet. She could feel the weight of it on her skin. Walker stayed close but didn't speak for her. He never did. It was Ruth Granger, the butcher's wife, who walked up first. "Heard you built the Walker garden from scratch," she said. "Only thing growing right this season?" Lena nodded. "Mostly beans and stubbornness." Ruth smiled. "That's enough to feed anyone." Others came after that. The blacksmith's wife offered cider. The schoolteacher asked if Lena could read. One by one, the wall cracked. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. But it happened. Then came the moment that lodged itself in her bones forever. An older woman with silver hair and thick hands, Mrs. Tilley, the midwife, came over, handed Lena a small basket of bread and said, "We're lucky to have a woman like you out here." A woman. Not a girl, not a stray, not a whisper or warning. A woman. Lena could hardly breathe around it. That night, back at the cabin, she placed the basket on the table and sat quietly, hands folded. "You did more than survive today," Walker said. "You stood." "They called me a woman," she whispered. "I heard." "No one ever has." He nodded, staring into the fire. "That's because you didn't just grow up. You made yourself." And for the first time since she'd been dragged onto a train car with nothing but fear in her hands, Lena felt full. Not just fed, not just clothed, but known, recognized, not for what had been done to her, but for what she'd chosen to become. The envelope arrived by mistake. Or maybe not. The town postman wasn't used to seeing her name on anything, let alone penned in soft ink across the front like someone had written it with care. Lena Walker. She stared at it for a long time before she touched it. There was no return address, only a government seal and the faint smell of old paper. Walker found her by the porch, unmoving, the letter gripped in both hands like it might vanish if she blinked. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I don't know anyone who writes letters." "Might be time you did." She opened it with fingers that shook despite her strength. Inside was a folded note, yellowed at the edges, and a certificate with a stamped signature. The letter was from a judge. "We regret the handling of Miss Lena's case. Due to clerical error, her status was never formally transferred following her auction. As of this letter, she is legally independent, free of claim, and no longer a ward of the county. Additionally, due to complications in prior placement, she is entitled to a restitution payment of $30 and permanent residence approval in the territory. $30. Freedom in ink, words no one could take back. But what caught her most wasn't the money or the name. It was the word independent, legal, chosen. Her hands clenched around the paper as tears pooled without falling. She looked at Walker. Why now? Because you outlasted what tried to erase you, he said. Even paper can't ignore that forever. Do I keep it? She whispered. You frame it, he said, right beside your name on the wall. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the fire, the letter on her lap, her hands stained with ash from where she'd reached for a log too fast. The children she once was, the frightened girl, the silent one, the girl bought for less than a meal, she saw them all sitting around her. And none of them had a voice. But she did now. And they listened. The certificate went into a carved frame Walker made the next morning. He didn't ask where she wanted it. He just hung it by the door, where anyone who walked in would see it first. Proof. Not of ownership, not of rescue, but of arrival. Lena stood in front of it and whispered the words under her breath again. Free. She said it like it was sacred, like it was earned, because it was. And the West, so full of forgetting, would remember her now. Spring came with a hush that year, as if the land had decided to let them breathe before blooming. The snow melted in patches like memories, slow and stubborn, but giving way all the same. Lena walked barefoot through the garden, not because she had to, but because she could. Because the earth didn't feel like punishment anymore. Behind her, the cabin stood steady, smoke curling from the chimney, laundry flapping gently in the wind. Inside, the certificate still hung by the door. Her name still etched in the wood above the hearth, side by side with Walker's. But what mattered most now wasn't what was written. It was what had changed. She was no longer the girl people whispered about, no longer the one eyes slid away from in pity or disgust. They didn't call her broken anymore. They called her teacher when she showed the Granger twins how to count beans and read road signs. They called her neighbor when she carried firewood to Ruth's sick aunt without asking for anything back. They called her Miss when children from town waved as she passed by on the old mare Walker had taught her to ride. They called her Woman, but she never forgot the first name they gave her, the one spoken in shadows, spit behind her back. Broken. She remembered it like an old coat she'd buried under the floorboards. She never tried to burn it. She didn't need to. She had outgrown it. On the first Sunday of spring, the town hosted its planting festival. And for the first time, Lena stood on stage beside the schoolteacher and read out the names of children who would receive seeds to tend their own soil. When her voice faltered once, it wasn't fear. It was awe. At what she was doing, at what they let her do. Afterward, a girl no older than 10 came up and pressed a flower into Lena's palm. Mama says you're what hope looks like, the girl whispered. And Lena smiled, not out of pride, but because for once she didn't have to wonder who she was. She looked over at Walker then, leaning against the fence, arms crossed, eyes quiet. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. She walked home later with dirt on her dress and joy in her chest. She was tired. She was strong. She was more than anyone thought she'd be. And the West, once ready to bury her, now bloomed where she stood. Because the girl they called broken? She didn't just survive. She changed everything.